All right, I think our technology is going. Do we have any changes to the agenda? I don't think so. Do we have any comments from the public? I don't see any public. I don't think we had any public. Let's take the minutes, August 5th.
I would move.
Thank you. Seconded by Dan. Thank you. Any questions, comments, corrections? I actually had one question and I forgot to ask Jay about it. On packet page 6, where we were talking with Jay Franklin about the conservation easement. So where the paragraphs start, the second sentence says, the legislation the town of Danby has requested would exclude any other qualifying organization to adopt an easement outside of Danby. And I feel like that's incorrect, but I should have asked Jay. But Dan or Rich, do you?
I'm looking for where you're reading.
Packet page 7, first paragraph, second sentence. The legislation the town of Danby has requested. I don't think that's accurate.
I think it's that this is exclusively for the town of Danby.
Right,
Right.
but it wouldn't be excluding.
Other easements.
Right,
Right. That the legislation is built for
yeah,
this exclusive use with the town of Danby.
right. So does Dan or Rich, do you concur?
I do, and I think also Jay said he wasn't endorsing or not endorsing the
Right.
exemption. He wasn't taking a position, which the next sentence seems to suggest. But he was saying if you're going to do it, it should be uniform across.
Right. So can we strike that second sentence? Does that make the most sense?
I think so.
All right. So legislation. And then do you want, Rich, do you feel like we should change that third sentence? Mr. Franklin believes?
Yeah, I think what he expressed was that if it's going to be in the town of Danby, it should be everything.
Okay. So Mr. Franklin expressed,
If this exemption exists in the town of Danby, it should be offered throughout the county.
I think Brittany's writing it down.
Should be offered throughout the county, not just one town within the town.
Yeah. Okay. Are those changes friendly to the mover and seconder? Dan?
Yes.
Okay. Anything else on the minutes then? All right, all in favor? Thank you. All right. I'm happy to welcome our friends from the Tompkins County Public Library. We have quite a delegation, and I invited them to talk to us a little bit about operations and their budget, sort of as a way to give them an opportunity to give us more detail before we go into our expanded budget committee meetings, because we are hoping to keep those meetings somewhat short and sweet. So I did invite other legislators. I think there's several on Zoom, so they'll be listening in, and of course, welcome to ask questions as we go along. So let's see, we have Teresa Vatican and Jen Schlossberg and Sarah O'Shea and Blixie Tate and Michelle Benjamin there. And Teresa and Jen and Sarah have been acting as our combined public library director while we're sort of in transition with trying to find a new director and Susan Curry leaving as interim director. So thank you all for being here. I welcome you to give us your presentation and then we'll open it up for any questions.
Thank you, Amanda. Good afternoon, everyone. Like she said, I'm Jen Schlossberg. I'm with the Tompkins County Public Library. I'm head of Access Services there. And first, we'd like to thank the Government Operations Committee for welcoming us to this meeting, and Amanda specifically for inviting us. We love to talk about the library, so this is this is a treat for us. So we just want to talk about the library during the time of COVID, because as with all of us, it's been in the forefront of everybody's minds over the last 18 months or so. And we want to talk about some of the things that we've done this past year and a half, and you know, how we're going to be moving forward. So let me just get started here. So I just want to start off with the financial impact of COVID. I know all of us certainly felt it when March 2020, when everything changed for us. And due to the pandemic, the county had to make, of course, necessary reductions. And as a result, our quarterly appropriation was reduced by 25%, or $462,016 in the third and fourth quarters of 2020. And then in 2021, we were reduced by an additional 12%, or $442,935. Because of, well, in addition to county support, we also experienced a reduction in support from the Friends of the Tompkins County Public Library, as well as
Hang on 1 second. I think somebody on Zoom mute themselves, please. Thanks. Sorry.
That's okay. So due to these reductions, oops, let me back up here for just a second. We had to make a 15% staff reduction. And we were, because we were faced with the fiscal reality of what was happening. So instead of involuntarily laying off staff, we offered early retirement incentives because we had applied for and received PPP funding. So we lost some key positions, department head and multiple key staff at the library. But you know, public libraries we're good at adapting and changing, and we restructured for more efficiency to be able to lessen the impact of what was happening. One of the things that we did was initially we were offering really basic services, so we cross-trained all the departments so that we could create a whole library approach. And one of the silver linings out of all of this is that we were all working with each other instead of, you know, in our own departments. I mean, we're not a really small organization, but we're big enough that sometimes we end up in our silos. So it was really nice for us to be able to do that. And, you know, there were some really positive things that way that came out of collaborations across the different departments. And then, you know, we continue to provide basic service community until prior to June 1st, 2021, we were working a reduced schedule and fairly scaled back services. But then starting June 1st of this year, we expanded our hours back to 60 hours, which is mandated by the state of New York. We're the central library for the Finger Lakes Library System. And what comes along with that is that we do have a mandate for the number of hours that we can be open, the sizes of the collections, the budget, as well as complying with maintenance of effort with local support. So we have been operating on regular hours this whole summer, which has been really nice for us to get back doing more of what we really love to do the most. We've begun to add back more of programming, collections, community collaborations and outreach, but we are constrained with limited staffing. We did use one-time PPP money to reinstate a few positions just so that we could open back up June 1st. We needed to at least have enough staff that we could operate safely. So now I am going to pass the mic to my colleague, Teresa Vatican.
I'm going to talk about the timeline, and we're going to start with March 13th. That was the day that we learned that the library would close. Just a week before, we had put out information on COVID-19 from the CDC. There was a lot of uncertainty at that time. We had also put signs up saying, if you're sick, stay home. So just within that week, we went into closing mode. Right away, our leadership team started meeting weekly on Zoom. We really discussed what reopening would look like and how to really make it safe for patrons and for staff. The county facilities was very helpful in installing plexiglass at all the service points and helping us with our double door. We have 2 entrance and exit doors, but we needed them both to be entrance, exit. Hard to explain, but we got a grant for that, and facilities helped us with that, and we thank them for that. When we were closed, we saw a definite increase in ebook and e-audiobook usage. And so we started allocating more funds to those collections. And we owe a big thanks to the Friends of the Library for that support. Jen Schlossberg figured out a way to get library cards into people's hands without ever leaving her living room. She got library cards to the community members who wanted to take advantage of our overdrive collection. We also worked on digital resources that would keep people entertained at home. We wanted to be a library for people still, even though we were closed. The youth services and adult services staff automatically started working on virtual programming. It included book clubs, robotics, baby, family, and Chinese story times, graphic novel book clubs. Our first program was with poet laureate Melissa Tuckey, former poet laureate Melissa Tuckey, who did social solidarity haiku. After she had done 3, we put a big window display up of our favorite haikus that really addressed what it's like to live in the pandemic. In June of 2020, we started offering curbside and in-lobby Holtz pickup. People were in and out. The staff walked through all types of weather: rain, snow, ice, wind, storms. Not lightning, of course. We wanted to keep them safe. Patrons were so happy to have the books in their hand. We also started binge bundles and book bundles. We knew everyone was streaming Netflix, binging TV shows, and we figured we would do the same for our patrons by putting books and materials into bags that they had requested, and they wanted certain themes. In August of 2020, we were one of the first libraries in the region to open our internet copy, fax, and print services for patrons. We knew this is crucial because a lot of people do not have access to the internet. We also started in September, we knew it was voting season and we wanted to practice civic engagement. So we teamed up with the League of Women Voters, and we had a table out front to offer voter registration and also information on how to vote. And we talked to 40 people that day. So then in December of 2020, we started doing make and take kits. The youth services department teamed with a lot of organizations. Kids came in really excited to pick up their kits that they could make at home. Yeah, they couldn't do it in the library, but it was there and we had instructions on how to do it and they could take it home and make it. In January of 2021, we started offering express browsing. We heard a lot of patrons. I miss looking at books. I miss touching the books. It's very hard to pick out books when I can't see them. We did everything we could virtually, but I found the browsing to be too complicated. It was limited to 30 minutes, but on one of the first days that we offered it, there was a patron that wasn't aware that we were offering browsing again. And when I told her, she jumped up and down near the back door. That's where our front door was at the time. In February of 2021, we knew we had to offer tax forms any way we could. People could come in and get them, but we also had people that were still uncomfortable coming in. So we offered curbside pickup if they called ahead, and we asked them what forms they needed. We put them in an envelope and brought them out. In March, we opened a COVID information station because we were getting a lot of questions and phone calls from older adults that were really uncomfortable with technology, and we knew we needed to do something to help them. We contacted Office of the Aging too, so that we could have a contact number in case they had no internet, but they could also come into the library and get that information. And as Jen said, in June of 2021, we did have to start offering 60 hours a week. We made it work by working together. And in July, we've now been able to offer seating again in study rooms, and they're very popular with our community. We see a lot of people coming in every day, either doing interviews, going to having meetings, and we do require masks because safety is our biggest, still the most important thing during this time. Now I'm going to pass the mic on to Sarah O'Shea, who's going to talk about community support.
So at the library, being a vital resource for our community has always been one of our main priorities, and nothing was different when the pandemic struck. We recognize that the library meets a lot of needs, a lot of different needs for a lot of people in the community. And for a certain group of our population, the physical library building is the only safe and warm or cold in the summer place where they can come and sit and be. We recognized that with our limited hours and services in the beginning of our opening of our doors, that we weren't meeting that need. So we partnered with Loaves and Fishes, and we opened up our Borg Warner community room to become a warming center. It was open we began it at the end of December 2020 through April 2021. We provided comfortable seating. There were Loaves and Fishes staff members, as well as access to various services that the community members might need. 1,959 community members were served by this warming station. So we were really happy to be able to offer the Borg Warner room for that use. Obviously, as you all know, the census was going on as we were all trying to deal with the pandemic. We recognized at the library that having a complete count for our community was incredibly important. So we were close partners with the county to work to make that happen. One of the things that we did was we offered the Borg Warner room for enumerator training in August to make sure that that process continued on successfully. Healthcare was also on everyone's mind during this time, of course. So we also used the Borg Warner room to provide services such as the Tompkins County CPR and AED training. In September 2020 and May 2021, we offered the room for that training, and 85 community members were served. And then this past summer, of course, as vaccines became more available and people were being encouraged to get vaccinated, we opened the Borg Warner room for some pop-up vaccination clinics, and 30 community members were served through that. So we were happy to use that Borg Warner room in those ways to help support our community. In terms of access services or circulation, obviously when we closed our building, we had to cease circulating physical items to the community. But as my colleagues have mentioned, we did not slow down on circulating e-resources like ebooks and e-audiobooks. That was very steady, and we increased our collections in response to the needs of our library members. When we opened our doors June 1st, fortunately, slowly but steadily, our patrons came back to the building. We saw, as Teresa mentioned, we saw a lot of emotions. We saw tears. We heard woo-hoos in the Avenue of the Friends. It was very heartwarming for the staff to see and to recognize that so many in the community really appreciate what we do. As you can see from this chart, starting in June 2020, when we did open our doors, we've had a steady increase of usage in terms of circulation. We aren't back up to our pre-COVID numbers quite yet, but we do anticipate this growth to continue on throughout the year. With that continued growth brings a need to rebuild our staffing to meet that growth and those needs. Adult services and youth services, as Teresa has mentioned, we continued our services, our reference services, our programming, almost from day one of the shutdown. Took us a little while to learn how to use Zoom and record things through YouTube and all of that, as I'm sure all of you also had to learn. In terms of reference questions, from April 2020 to August 2021, we answered over 20,000 reference questions. We had to adjust throughout the pandemic in terms of the safety regulations and guidelines from the county and the state. So in the beginning, we were answering reference questions online from home. We moved to answering phone call questions when we were able to be at the reference desk and in the library building. And fortunately, now we're able to be answering reference questions in person, which feels really good to be able to do again. So we constantly were trying to adjust as the safety requirements and needs changed. In terms of our reference questions, there's a wide variety of reference questions that we get. In this term, during this period, we had a variety of questions, including we had staff help a patron set up their target employee account and download pay stubs. We had staff locate a local contact for the Black Lives Matter movement in the community. We had staff locate Spanish language learning materials for a librarian in Lansing schools. And we also were contacted by a sponsor for a family that recently moved to the area from Honduras. And we were able to provide them book lists as well as sign up their 2 kids for library cards. So that was wonderful that we were able to help with that as well. In terms of programming, Teresa went through a lot of the details, but from April 2020 to August 2021, we've been able to offer 631 programs to our community with over 18,000 participants and online interactions. Again, like our reference service ability to give our reference service, we had to adjust our programming. So we began all virtual. When the weather became nicer, we were able to do outdoor in person, which is what we've been doing this summer, and we've been really, really enjoying it. Although Mother Nature has made it a little challenging with all the heat and the rain. But it's been great to see patrons in person. And then we are hoping to add on some small programming in person in the library. And right now the goal is to offer a wide range of formats for our programming to match the wide range of comfort levels that are in our community in terms of they can choose virtual, outdoor, in person, whatever their comfort level is. So now I'd like to pass this along to Blixie Page, who is a member of our executive committee of our board of trustees and the chair of our director search committee. She's going to give a little insight on the search that we have been proceeding with.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having us here today. I think I know a number of folks here. And thanks to Amanda also, who served on our search committee. So the couple of comments I just want to make is that this was a national search. The county was wonderful, HR department, in helping us really widely advertise and broadcast the position. It is a civil service position with testing requirements. And we ended up with 25 applicants, which we were pretty happy with from across the country. We found that only 15 of them, however, completed the test. So the civil service test is still a barrier in many ways. And the people who did the best were New York State residents. So I wanted to comment that our process has also been very inclusive. We've included a lot of feedback from staff. We had a pretty broad and diverse search committee, including representation from different stakeholders. And all along, also very transparent with regular updates and memos to staff and to trustees with what's happening. We've also been very disciplined in our approach. We agreed early on what process we were going to follow, what steps we we're going to take, what questions we we're going to ask. And we actually went through 2 rounds of finalist candidates, as some of you might be aware because you may have attended the webinar presentation of our finalist candidates. Unfortunately, even after making 2 offers, they were not accepted by our preferred candidates for personal reasons. Most recently, I think it was a very difficult decision for this individual. I think she was very seriously thinking about coming here and even looking at the area while she was here. So naturally, we're disappointed, but at the same time, we're not willing to appoint someone to the position, the trustees aren't, without being confident that it's who is going to be best for our library, for our community, for our staff. So at this point, the search is suspended, and we will resume when we can retest and re-advertise and kind of start over. I don't know what else to say about that. In the meantime, we do have, as you see here, 3 wonderful folks who are serving as interim acting directors. The trustees, in particular, our 2 co-presidents, Ingrid Jensen and Martha Hardesty, are working with the leadership team of the library and the trustees to identify a longer-term interim plan and an acting interim director to take us through until we hire permanently. And so that is where we are. We're sort of in the process of figuring that out right now.
So I get to do the finale as well. So people are drawn to public libraries as a career because we are very passionate about them and the role in the community. And I think that's apparent just how we responded when the library shut down. It really pushed us to be creative and nimble during difficult times. We really were trying to offer services as safely as we could, and continuing to move forward. Starting with e-content, then working with the physical collection and various forms of programming. So we're good at responding. I feel like we really we're very proactive in that approach, in our approach to the library and moving it into the future. In terms of how we move forward, we do need to restore some of what was lost, and all of these services, the things that are mentioned about keeping curbside, because we want to keep those types of things. We've realized that they're really helpful, and continuing book and binge bundles and various programming, all of those things are delivered by people, by the staff. And so we really do need to restore some of what was lost. And the last thing is really reimagining. We've already started doing that. We've learned, we've certainly taken lessons from all that has happened during COVID. And it has made us be even more creative. And we're generally a pretty creative bunch anyway. I'm just gonna put that in there. But it's required us to, look at things in a new way. And we really, we'd like to continue to expand our services with the ongoing support of Tompkins County and to give our community the public library that it deserves. So if you have any questions, we'll be glad to answer those. We've also included our email addresses here. If you would like to email us separately later, that's fine too. And again, thank you for having us.
Great, thank you so much. You are definitely a creative bunch. So let's see if anybody has questions. And Zoom people, you can raise your hand. I see Rich and then Dan.
The timeline you presented reminds me of a very bad dream. But it also really speaks to just how much more the library is than books. It's so much more. It's good to see that. And thanks for coming in and all the work you do.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Are all the services restored within the library, or still some on hold?
We still have a few things that we haven't opened up yet. The Borg Warner Room in general we've had specific groups in there, but we haven't gone back to completely opening up that for, we have like an online reservation system. We haven't reinstated that. We're not doing outreach is a big piece. We're not doing as much with the outreach. We have some that we're doing, but that's been fairly scaled back at this point.
And thank you. And are you using volunteers at this point?
We are, yes. We haven't brought back our full volunteer workforce yet, but my department relies heavily in circulation, and we've brought back some key people. Of course, the safety was an issue for a while, just making sure we didn't have too many people in the workspaces, but we have brought a lot of them back.
And if a new person wanted to volunteer, are you accepting people at this time?
We're accepting applications. We do have a volunteer coordinator that handles placing people and, looking at where the needs are right now. So, yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Leslie.
Hi, yes, thanks for the great presentation. Wanted to ask a little bit about the cross-training. I thought that was interesting. Were you all fully remote at the time you were doing this cross-training, or were folks in the building in 2020 and cross-training there? How'd that go down?
I can talk to that a bit. Teresa and I were heavily involved with that, being the head of adult services and youth services. So it was when we were back in the building, but in part due to our staffing shortage, as well as, again, wanting to encourage that whole library approach, we worked with the youth services and adult services librarians who typically in the past would only work at their own reference desk. We have an adult desk, a teen desk, and a children's desk. Instead, we now have people working across departments at those reference desks. As well, internally, we've been working on creating more of a team approach and having multiple departments within those teams. So again, working together, communicating together to meet the needs of the community and the staff themselves.
Right. One of the other things that was a huge help for my staff, because we work the circulation desk, is that both departments got on board and we all trained and worked together. And that was tremendous help with doing curbside service. And when we were doing in lobby holds pickup, we would often have a long line within the, like we had a queue that you come in the back door and line up. And then we would have staff there, like getting names and taking materials to them. And it's not something my staff could have done on their own at all. Yeah, a great model for flexibility and adaptability. Thank you.
Definitely. I was going to ask, and you probably said this, or I've been at all the board meetings, but what is the staffing level at this point? Do you have enough people? Are you looking to add more, or where are you at?
Yes, we are. We will be asking for partial restoration of some of the staffing that we did lose. Like we mentioned, we had 15% reduced staffing, which is part of the reason why we have to do the limitations of, we're offering programming, but not all the programming that we want to offer. We can't do the outreach that we want to do because of staffing. So yes, we're hoping to at least partially restore some of that staffing so we can continue this forward momentum.
43
Can you come up to a microphone?
We had 43 FTEs prior to COVID. We lost 6.27 FTEs. We're currently at 36.9. We've used some one-time funding to restore a couple of positions that we could open. We'll be asking for 3.1 FTEs in our OTR request.
Okay, great. All right, other questions from anybody? Well, I want to say that I was in New York City this past weekend, and I went to the New York Public Library, and it's a beautiful building and the lions out front and the columns, but I thought of our library, which is much more friendly and cozy. And I was able to find a little reading room to sit in, but it was very, not personable in any way. So you guys are doing the right things.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here. And I guess we'll see you, I think, in October at the budget meeting. Great. All right. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Okay. We are going to move on to administration. We have a couple of resolutions. And I see Lisa there on Zoom. Let's go ahead and move this fund balance policy, and then we can discuss it. Can I get somebody to move that? Nobody wants to move it. Rich moves, seconded by Leslie. This is the resolution to update the administrative policy manual, policy 05-04 fund balances. So you see the edits in there. I don't know, Lisa or Rick, if you want to talk to us a little bit about this.
Sure, I can speak to it briefly and then hand it over to you guys to debate. So this policy was on the Budget, Capital, and Personnel Committee goals to address and finalize this year. And we had made good progress on this policy in 2019. I know Jason and Rick had done some research on it. And we finalized those revisions to the policy, updated the definitions, and include revised targets to you for consideration today. For the larger funds, ranges are provided, both a minimum and a maximum, which will provide us with triggers on either end to either add to the fund when we fall below the minimum, and or to conversely to spend down the fund when we're above the maximum. And like I said, the targets were set based on research, which Rick could speak more to, of similar bond rated counties in New York and the US, based on their median fund balances, and also based on GFOA standards. And, you know, we want to find a range that we feel is appropriate based on our needs and fiscal responsibilities, and to provide us with clearer guidance about spending down, which is the case now when our maximum is exceeded. So with that, I'm happy to just hand it over to you guys to discuss further. Or Rick, I don't know if you had other things to add.
No, I just sent a couple of emails in response to Martha's questions yesterday. So there were 2 or 3 emails that were floating about in the last 24 hours that kind of addressed our research and some of the technical language, meaning what does Moody's consider a median percent? A median simply means it's not a range, it's and it's not an average really, it's the middle. It's the middle of a group of numbers. So they go with the statistical definition of median, which is basically the middle of a group of numbers. So that's what Jason had pulled in his research in trying to get basically an understanding of what other counties were doing, because he was asked to look at what other counties were doing. And that was the easiest and best approach to take. You can go to the Moody's research document that I sent out, and you can look at counties compared nationwide as a country. You can look at counties in just New York State. You can look at counties with our same bond rating or similar bond rating just in New York, and by population. There's a lot of different ways that they sift the information, but those were the 2 elements that we used, both the GFOA recommended rate, which hasn't been changed in many, many years, and the Moody's bond rating fund balance percentage for counties like us in our same credit rating. So with that best information in mind is what Jason and I had put pencil to paper and started working out what this would mean for the various different fund balances, because this policy, even though you're focused mostly on the general fund, and we could have talked just about that, it also addresses some of the enterprise type funds and the other smaller funds, and it sets different and increased percentages for a target for fund balances for them also. So
Okay.
there's a lot of technical language in the emails, but we tried to satisfy your expectations, in that we just weren't pulling something out of the air, or just making up a number, pulling a number out of a hat. That there was a little bit of thought and comparison done in initial stages of the preparation of this policy. In this last revision, with Lisa's help and others weighing in, we tried to make changes to other various parts of the policy, definitions and things like that. and tools to use if we don't hit our targets at the end of the policy, things that were not in the previous resolution, because it hasn't been looked at and addressed for quite some time. So we stand by ready for questions.
All right, great. Questions from anybody? Comments, concerns? Martha?
Yeah, thanks. And thanks very much, Rick, for doing all the back and forth yesterday. I think obviously the policy is a real improvement so that we have a lot more direction about what we're doing. And it's good to have, the other fund balances, the more restricted fund balances better defined as well. So I'm going to really talk about the unassigned fund balance. Lisa, you mentioned that this gives direction for how to come back if we've gone below the target, below the floor, below the minimum, how we're supposed to come back. And that's clear and that's helpful. As opposed to spending down when we're over the maximum, as I read it, the only comment had to do with that it should be for one-time expenses, as much as possible, but, and that's certainly understood. However, I didn't see any similar sort of parallel. If it gets to be such and such over the maximum, we really should bring it down. In other words, that's really open-ended. There was no direction as far as how much is too much. And did you talk about that, or is there, what was your thinking?
So I think that's really why a range is provided, so that exceeding the upper end of the range is somewhat of a trigger, a decision-making point to spend down from there. And then the direction is really applying to non-recurring expenses such as capital or equipment. So there really wasn't much more to it than that. I think the more critical state we would find ourselves in would be if we fell below the minimum. So that was really what the focus of the replenishing deficiencies section was.
Right, that makes a lot of sense. So there, I don't see any language that suggests that we should add, like you're presenting 23% as the upper limit. I don't see any language that directs us to consider a spending program or consider using some of it if you get past 23%. That's not mentioned as I saw it. Is that right?
It's not mentioned, no.
Mentioned, okay. So I'm wondering if that should be in there. I'm not sure. One thing, what I mostly was discussing with Rick was about the range of 18 to 23, when I think really 16 to 20 is preferable, much more realistic. And I can go through some of the reasoning, but I'm not in this committee. I want to raise that here, but obviously I'm on BCP and we'll have the same conversation. So I could save it till later or go through it today, however anybody wants.
Well, does anybody on the committee, I haven't seen lots of interest in more discussion, but if you want to talk about that, we can. Dan, you're raising your hand.
Yeah, let's just say a few things. I think I'm going to be voting against the policy at this point. I feel like this is one of those examples of some people are just more comfortable with numbers in place and these guidelines that we may or may not follow, but at least they're there. It's a policy and we can refer to it, as opposed to just taking everything in the context and in that relative moment and thinking about all the things we need to think about and making decisions based on that. So I fall more into that latter category because there are a lot of things that we always need to think about. We know in our minds that we might need to renovate or build a new jail in the next 5 years. And so in the back of our minds, we're like, well, yes, we have a high fund balance, but we know we're going to be spending that money down the line. Or we believe that, we're going to be accumulating money in the fund balance for some reason or losing. In other words, we're making judgments all the time. And what I don't respond well to is trying to narrow those choices based on numbers that we've decided years before and written into a policy. I think about my time in the legislature, how when I first started, I think the fund balance was about $10 million, if I'm not mistaken. Now it's grown to 48 million. And, we kind of made the same decisions along the way when we were too low, as we were making or too high. That is, each year we decide what we want to do with this money. Do we need to save more? Should we start spending it? So that's kind of the philosophy behind why I'm not excited about this policy. And then particularly the parts where we have to spend down if we get too much. Again, I just find it a little pre-programmed and not taking into account what I think of as the judicial nature of this body, which is we're allowed to think about all kinds of things when making these decisions. And I don't think we should be on autopilot. Well, we've reached this number, therefore we have to act in a certain way. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Rich.
I will support the resolution for almost the same reasons Dan just stated, except that I'm not seeing that we are absolutely tied to following a policy. I think it's good to have the guidance and to have a common understanding of what our goals are in terms of maintaining fund balance. But doing so in the context of our larger decision-making process, where we can violate the policy if we've got a good reason to do it. I also think it's important, looking forward, that we're going to have a lot of new legislators that have not gone through the budget process, and having a clear set of guidance on what we're trying to do with our fund balance in terms of percentages, I think is a prudent thing. So I'll be voting for it.
Thank you. Leslie?
I appreciate hearing from my colleagues thinking about this. I think it's helpful to have policies that kind of craft the guidance, a guideline for the future, recognizing that it's definitely flexible to the needs at hand. Should something dire or important come to light, legislation can be passed to supersede. I do think that 16 to 20% is a reasonable approach considering how well the fund balance has been managed to date. But it is also helpful, I think, for administration to know that, perhaps if folks aren't keeping their eye on the ball so well in the future, we cannot project how people will manage, that they can rely on the fact that they have a plan in hand and can move forward and effectively administer, operations across the county, and that they would have something to fall back on that says, a lot of thought went into this. This is how we've built this to date. We thought it was important to have guidelines, and there would be something that's documented that shows that history of thinking and kind of financial prudence. So I think that 16 to 20% seems reasonable. I'm looking at these spend down, timelines. I'd like to think about those a little bit more. The one-time fund balance, should we get to the point where we are right now, where we have in excess of those percentages? I don't know if this will be popular, but we say that we should spend it on one-time expenditures or capital projects, but we should at least throw into the mix if we want to hold flat a tax levy or something like this. If we are in a good position, that should be something that's on the table to consider.
All right. Other comments or questions? Mike Lane.
Interesting discussion. Thank you. I sort of feel like Dan, that we don't want to tie our hands too tight here. I think the policy as proposed really deserves a chance to try to see how it goes. But I think Leslie is right. We can always override any policy that we have if the legislature wants to do that. We need to give guidance to staff and not do that willy-nilly. But we've got to be careful right now because, as we all know, there is discussion about going into the fund balance substantially. And there are those folks that want to see that fund balance reduced for spending on programs, recovery, whatever is happening. We need to do that slowly and carefully, whatever we're going to do. And speaking of the people who may be coming on next year, we don't want to tie their hands either on spending. That's why we have to be careful about what we're doing and making sure that what we aren't going out too far in what we're saying we're going to be using fund balance for example. But I appreciate the fact that this has been brought to us, and I think we should move it forward. And I'm not on the committee, but that's my opinion.
Thanks, Mike. I agree, and I appreciate the work that Lisa and Rick and others have put into this. Martha, why don't you go ahead and then let's vote on this.
All right, thanks very much. Here's a thought, and I, excuse me, I'm looking at the policy. The language says, this is packet page, what is that? 25 at the top, surplus fund balance. To the extent possible, the appropriation of balances in excess of the fund balance target should be applied to one-time non-recurring expenses. It says to the extent possible. So that doesn't prohibit other uses. So there's just one point. I wonder if, here's a different idea. I think the sort of the concern is about protecting the baseline. What if instead of a range, you just set the baseline, say 16, 17, 18%? That's really sort of the danger zone. That's the concern, is that you won't have what is recommended, 2 months of ongoing expense, 2 months worth of expenses, or let's say give a buffer 2 or 3 months, whatever the number is. So I guess I'd be more comfortable with just one number rather than a range. I don't know that the range is as important. I don't know if the top numbers is as important, and kind of as Dan is suggesting, we make these kinds of decisions in the full context of a lot of different, a lot of different factors, which you can never spell out in a policy anyway, which is fine. But I would just toss that out there as maybe stick with one number. I'm not sure a range gives you what you really need, which is protection from spending too far.
All right, Rich.
Yeah, I think the greater danger is the lower boundary, but there is a benefit I see to having the upper boundary as well, in that it's telling us we have enough pursuant to our policy. Maybe we would disagree with that and say we should save more, but it is an indication to the legislature that we're pushing into the territory that we should think about use of surplus funds. So I think the policy works from both directions. And for that reason, I'd favor the range.
All right, thank you. I think that we've heard lots of ideas and we should go ahead and vote. All in favor? Any opposed? All right, so that fails 2-2. Leslie.
Yeah. Amanda, I'm sorry, we can't see who voted here if we're watching on the screen.
Okay, Rich and I voted in favor, and Leslie and Dan voted opposed.
Thank you very much.
Leslie, you had did you want to say something, Leslie?
I do. I wanted to talk about the percentages, right? So we're voting on this as written, yes?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So that failed. All right, let's move on. We got plenty of other things to do.
Point of information.
Yes.
So we were told this is coming to Budget and Capital Committee as well.
That's correct. It's on their agenda for Tuesday, the 7th.
So if it passes that committee, it still goes to the legislature?
Yes,
Kathy's thinking.
I think it would.
yes,
Yeah.
I believe so, yes.
Okay, well,
It just wouldn't be recommended by Government Operations Committee.
for whatever it's worth, I'm glad to hear that because so that the full legislature does get to debate. Yeah.
Huh.
All right. Let's go ahead with Tompkins County Resolution 10350, Tompkins County Center for History and Culture Facility Operations Agreement. Can I have somebody move that? Rich moves, Leslie seconds. Questions, comments, discussion, Leslie?
I just wanted to ask on the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whereas it suggests that the operator will collect and retain all monthly rents. I just wanted to hear a little bit about how many renters are there and who is that they're collecting rent from?
Lisa or Rich? I guess Rich, you wanna,
Well, go ahead, Lisa.
or Amy? I'm not sure who's.
There's
Operational,
6 or 7
Amy helped with this.
agencies. Sorry, there's 6 or 7 not-for-profit agencies and the trust company who are in the premises.
Yep, Rich has it. There's, I think it is 7 at this point, nonprofits that are using that space.
All right, other questions? Okay, let's go ahead and vote. All in favor? That's unanimous. Thank you. All right, couple of discussions here. We are back to talking about our technology, budget for legislature streaming, hybrid meetings, all of that kind of stuff. I don't know, Dominic, or do you want to start us off and tell us what we need to know?
Yeah, I won't take too much of your time. I know that you've spoken about it via email and shared some of the questions around, but just to reiterate the questions that you passed along, Amanda, I think it's, as we look forward with how we stream these meetings, there are some questions that will require some direction from the legislature so that we know how to plan to pull it off professionally and really well. As you can see, we've got a couple of things sort of cobbed together to make things work. And it's our intention to make that more streamlined, the way this room is sort of designed to be as a studio to broadcast things. So one example is the screen that we have here is borrowed from the Department of Emergency Response. And for example, depending on the answers of how we do things, we may put in a contingent request to add one like this here and return this to them. They bought this under grant funding too, so I think if this particular unit would have to go back to their space. A few of the questions that we have is, do we want to continue to live stream all of these meetings, including or not including committee meetings to YouTube in the future, which I can report has proven to be an incredible tool for public access to information, for archives of things, et cetera, in addition to our IQM2 software and things that we already use. It's just a little more user-friendly. Do we want to continue to allow public and staff and non-committee members to join via Zoom as we have here? That's in one way a density reduction mechanism, but in other ways, it's certainly increased participation item. One thing how that affects us is how we invite the public to participate too. I think there's real opportunity potentially to invite the public more or be clearer to them on how they can engage with the legislature. That'll sort of impact how we do the screen decision-making And then if there were to do something like that and allow the hybrid option or teleconferencing option moving forward, would there be any additional limits placed on public comment beyond the 3 minutes, number of speakers for different things? It could vastly increase in some scenarios the number of speakers. And the last thing I'll just add is, and Kathy passed along the language, the state seems to be allowing virtual meetings. Again, I don't think it's been officially signed yet. I haven't seen the confirmation of that, but the text of the language would authorize public bodies to meet and take action by either not allowing the public in person to something, so you could space out, for example, or so that you could all do it back at home or park here at home. So it would kind of go, it would essentially go right back to the way we were doing it before as well throughout the pandemic. So those are the questions and the current sort of state of things as we have them.
Great, thank you for explaining and getting us started. Yeah, I think committee members, Kathy has a copy if you want to read the language that just came out from the state legislature.
Is that proposal for temporary, like an emergency use, not permanent?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. So that, I mean, that's important to take note of, but we also, I think, still need to address the bigger questions of what we want going forward, and regardless of COVID, and, you know, we still need to answer some of these questions. So yeah, so I did send out a message to legislators after having met with Dominic and Lisa to talk through some of this. And I proposed these 3 main questions. There are other questions. There's questions about, you know, do we want to continue streaming to cable networks? You know, how are we going to negotiate with our tech fellow going forward, and, you know, getting other staff to be working on that. But those aren't really things that we need to discuss today. So I don't want to get into that. And I will just say, so just for transparency, the questions that I had put out to the legislature, which Dominic kind of already said, but I'll just be very clear. Do we want to continue to live stream full legislature and committee meetings to YouTube for the foreseeable future? I got a handful of responses back to my email, and everyone said yes, who responded to that. Do we want to continue to let public staff, non-committee members attend via Zoom for the foreseeable future? The caveat being, as Dominic said, we would need to purchase a screen. We'll need to give this one back to the Department of Emergency Response. And additionally, it may mean that our clerks, our legislator clerks, would need to have 3 staff members present to be operating their various jobs that they would need to do, including the technology. With those caveats, the people who responded via email did say yes, we want to continue having this Zoom option. And then the final question was, do we want to limit speaking time for public comment like we do in person? As Dominic said, it could, you know, if we get a lot of people coming on Zoom, we need to have a way to limit that. We need to have our 3-minute limit, or, you know, we kind of need to rethink that. So again, folks who responded to me on email said yes. So I guess I would turn to the committee and see what your thoughts are on all of this right now. Leslie.
Thank you. I responded to the email with yeses for all of those. I continue to say yes to all of those questions. Thank you for asking the questions and facilitating the discussion. The one thing that you just mentioned that I think we should talk about a little bit more closely was the time and energy of the clerks. So I think that's an important facet that we haven't gone deeply into, but we should understand that.
Yeah.
And is there potential for other or different staff in order to give clerks a break, or to allow them to do other things that they might need to do to help facilitate IT and tech? I guess.
Sure. Well, and so maybe Kathy and Dominic can both say something about this, because Dominic has been doing the tech, you know, that end of it, right, for our full legislature meetings.
For full legislature meetings, yes.
But I think what you said to me was that, you know, the clerks are the ones who know you know, the guests coming to the meetings, the public comment, you know, they're the ones who are in touch with all of that. And so might, you know, it'd be easier for them to manage that in that piece of it. Is that correct or not correct, Kathy?
No, I think that's correct. I think getting into the, you know, deeper side of the technology is where some of the difficulties may come.
Yeah, I think that goes back to we've plugged a couple of things together and it does make it an extra layer of complication, which, you know, obviously right now we're in a committee meeting. Jim Blizzard, who's on a small contract to do the work that he does for us, isn't here to plug it in the way we would in an expanded budget committee or something. So a lot more falls on the clerks to pull off the streaming, to present things well, and then to do the sort of audio in the room. And it's all sort of separate systems put together. You know, this guidance would allow us to think about if we wanted to have a more streamlined solution. And in terms of, you know, yes, I'm working on you know, during the full legislature meetings, hosting it, that certainly is one concern of, I'm not aware of who is coming in or out or things, and that's sort of falls under what the clerks do, but I'm also working on the highlights and some other things as they come up, and try to capture that during the meeting. So I do have other activities going on in conjunction.
Right. Go ahead, Leslie.
It seems to me that other staff or individuals could be trained to do some of these things, and we can also communicate, even the clerks could communicate with folks who are expected. And, you know, I think that could be innovative solutions might be identified that takes the burden off the same folks.
Sure. I think that one of the things that Dominic said to me before was that making this sort of bigger decision, do we want to continue having Zoom, will help them figure out a lot of these details and give them, and, you know, so if Zoom is the platform that we're going to be using, then we can go forward and answer some of the other things. Is that?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Rich?
I was going to say yes to questions.
Okay, thank you. Dan?
I'd like to say yes to all the questions too, and then, but my concern is the clerks and the staffing. So first of all, my understanding, we're discussing doing this at every legislature meetings and the committee meeting.
Yes.
And that requires 3 people.
Yes.
And we're also talking about phasing you out of the responsibilities since you have other responsibilities. If we're just relying on the clerks, that's not sustainable because vacation, sick days, you know, all the other things. I think we really have to think about one or more people getting trained on this to come in and do this. I don't know what that would look like. I just wanted to say that part.
Yeah, definitely.
That we cannot just rely on the clerks. That doesn't make sense. That's not, to me, that seems like not sustainable.
Right. Go ahead, Rich, and then I've got some Zoom people.
Yeah, I know it's perhaps a sin to even suggest that legislators could do anything functional, but if we could get trained, could we do some of the administrative stuff necessary to have a meeting on Zoom? Anyway. Kathy?
That was funny.
Sure.
Yeah, I will add on that really briefly. There are some, we're really trying to limit the total number of sign-ins to the Google end of the account that we have that this runs through. It's also the space where we have a lot of different document folders that we'll share with the public for different things, and some documents that are being worked on across, you know, like, for example, our SharePoint doesn't have, you know, county, and we can't, you know, if we had community members working on something or vendors or something. So there is that account we do try to limit access to, and that's one of the key functions as well of how we're doing. So
are you politely insulting our technical abilities?
Nope. I'm just saying that the more we share that password out, the less secure some of that work and the access to our YouTube channel is just in general.
Go ahead, Leslie.
Perhaps we could create a user that's just for the facilitator of these meetings, and then someone types into the facilitator code. I get what you're saying.
It's certainly possible.
There's limited access, confidentiality concerns, and important data that we don't want mistakenly deleted.
Yeah, we've been really careful about the Zoom bombing and everything. Yeah, that's sort of what I'm trying to get to is there's the ability for, you know, passwords or things get shared or inadvertently or accidentally or things that it opens us up. Just sort of ITS hat of thinking what they would be saying.
Right, definitely. Let's go to Mike Lane.
Thank you. Had a couple of questions, but on this new legislation, and I know it got handed out here this morning to your group, but my understanding is it goes till sometime in January. It's a temporary fix. Is that right?
I think that's what.
That's correct. I believe it's January 15th.
Okay, so we are talking again, just a temporary pushback of what we had. And so we've had a trial run here. I wanted to ask Dominic, why do we have to buy a new TV screen? Why can't we figure out a way to simply project it on our screens, on our drop-down screens? To me, that's there. It would save some money. I think you can watch the people on those screens from both sides. So Dominic, is there an answer to that?
Yeah, certainly. That's a very good question. It's certainly very possible to do it on those screens. There are a few reasons that when we came up with this current solution that's being used with the large screen at the end, decided not to recommend that. One of which was that was a time when social distancing was mandatory, regardless of other pieces of guidance. And so we weren't sure how we'd lay out the room or do different things like that or allow staff in, et cetera. So that's one piece. The second piece is the interfaces that we have in the room and what's hooked up to computers and how well the computer can be used to do different things. So the computer screen at the end is more easily sort of on Zoom, something that staff are used to. It mirrors the screen that's used at the other space that was already being used during COVID. And the third thing, and this is more of a personal preference thing that certainly, folks could disagree with my assessment. I feel that the large screens, if they project the entire meeting, become slightly more distracting and put people at different levels. If you were at sort of a hybrid model where there's voting happening on the screen or someone speaking on the screen versus at the table, this solution was designed to bring legislators who are joining remotely at a more sort of human scale to the room. And so it wasn't distracting, during the meeting on the larger screens. That's more of a personal thought that we had as we went through designing it to try and make it professional and not distracting. It could certainly still work with the large screens, but that's where the decision-making came through, Mike.
Okay, I think maybe we ought to still consider that. I don't know how much this TV costs, but I'm guessing about $10,000 or something, doesn't it?
Just about all in with everything. We've already bought the stand, which will stay here either way, unless it was repurposed for another area, but other departments already have them in their budgets. But yes, around $10,000.
I don't know whether we really need to stream all our committee meetings. I know it's popular to do that, but it is expensive. And you folks have talked about the time commitment from legislature staff. That's an important thing to think about. I don't know what will be put in for the budget process this year from Kathy's department, but at the least, if we're going to be doing this into next year, we better have some more money put in there to hire extra staff to come in and part-time people to run this thing, and not expect our staff to do all of that and do all their work too. They're pretty good about things, but I'm sure it weighs on them as well. And why wouldn't it when they've had to take on all this extra technical work recently? And Dominic's been held right in the fire of things with the pandemic. Has done a great job for us. But where we've lost is what we used to have done, and that was the reporting about the committees to the public that we're not getting at this point. I think that's one of the issues about, where the power of the legislature is. It's in its committees. And so it's important that the public understands what's going on in committees as well as the full legislature meetings as well. But until we get back to more normal, I suppose that's going to be harder for Dominic or whoever's doing that to be able to handle. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. Henry, and then Martha, and then Leslie.
Yes, I also said yes to all the questions. I would also suggest that we would hire part-time a clerk to be video taping or whatever to basically replace Dominic in terms of our meetings. It doesn't seem like it'd be that much money. Also, I have a question for Dominic. What is Dua doing instead of having the screen up there?
That department is just not using their small conference room for Zoom meetings at this time. They have reset up the room that the EOC was in so they can have the meetings in there. And they have a second screen in that room that's even larger and has all this capability plus a little bit more as well. So they're still able to do things, but I think they'd like to be able to be more flexible. They're certainly happy with this being used. I was up there today meeting with them about a few things, and they're certainly happy to lend this to make sure that we're doing what we need to do to get it out to the public. But yes, they're only using one of the two rooms currently.
Okay. And finally, in terms of the time limits that we place on people, I know the city of Ithaca, when they were doing hybrid meetings, they put time limits on people. We haven't had that many public speak to us. And so I'd hate to see a different rule for that. And so I'd say just still have a 3-minute rule for people speaking, because if they were in person, they'd be under the limit of 3 minutes too. And not that many people come. So that would be my response.
Great, thank you, Henry. I just also wanted to throw in that the Public Information Advisory Board did pass a resolution in support of hybrid in-person teleconference public meetings. And I can forward it to you. Dominic sent it to me, but the resolve says, be it resolved, the PIAB respectfully requests that legislators and administrators of Tompkins County Legislature, I think it's supposed to say, continue to offer the hybrid public meeting engagement model now and into the post-pandemic future. So just throwing that in there. Martha, go ahead.
Thanks, Amanda. Thanks. This is a really important discussion and sort of an example of why you can't, sometimes you just can't go back again. I answered yes to the questions on the email as well. A couple of other thoughts. One is I'm a little worried about spending money when we don't know what'll happen after January 15th and what's required. So that's a little puzzle in my head. Another is I wonder about maybe we should step back and look for a consultant that would really know the landscape of things and really have time to dig into some options and then come back to us with options and prices. One thing, for example, I've been on a couple of, and so if we hired a consultant now and then like put some amount of money into the contingent fund for 2022, I've been on a couple of conferences where it was clear there was some outside vendor running the meeting. And I can't remember the platforms. I could probably find out, but like there was somebody hired who did all of that administration so that the presenters and the people talking didn't have to deal with it. I wonder if that would be a service that at the end of the day would be more cost effective if we end up continuing to do hybrid rather than worrying about our staff having to do that. it's sort of a subscription. Yeah, we need 4 meetings this week and we pay per hour or something like that. So that's the sort of thing maybe a consultant can help us understand what those choices are. I don't know if people had a chance to look at what the IDA has done, and I did hear back from, I think it was Dominic, maybe Greg, that took a lot more time and, a lot more staff work, but it's possible. And as I commented before, people watching, if you don't know everybody's voices, you don't know who's talking at all. We can't, as you all have experienced yourselves, we can't see any of you. It's like this one big room, we see a desk. If it's not too much trouble, I have the IDA meeting up on my screen. If I could share my screen, Kathy or whoever, I could show very quickly what that looks like from the IDA. Would that be okay?
No, we're not going to do that right now. I think we're just talking about these basic questions, and I think we've all, we understand that there's lots of options, but I think, yeah, let's just continue on with this discussion here.
Okay, well, I suggest people take a look, just Google Tompkins County IDA on YouTube. You can find it yourself. That there may be some better choices that are more satisfactory, better for the public, and even less intrusive for our staff. So thanks.
Well, I thank you, Martha. I think, Dominic has put a lot of time into this as well as Lisa, and I think there are a lot of options, but he's our consultant at the moment, and he knows what's going on and he knows the system. So we've got a couple more questions here, but we really should move along. Let's see, Annie.
Thanks, Amanda. So I also said yes to the first 3 questions, or the questions that you posed. So thank you for doing this and all the work Dominic's done. So just to reiterate, just one concern, I know it has to do with the longer term, but we're just looking at, one part of this, but I really am concerned if we continue to use the display, the monitor that we're using, that it is not visible to most visitors in the room in the current setup. So I'd like that to be just part of the consideration if we're paying for, going out and paying for something, how are we going to deal with that in the long term? Thank you.
Thanks, Annie. You're not responding to that, Dan, are you? No.
No, it's a new comment.
Okay. All right. I have Leslie, then Rich, then Dan.
Thank you. Just briefly, appreciate Ann's point there about the public being able to see an interface if they actually come to the meeting, what's happening on the screen, wherever the future screen might be. Also wanted to say it would be helpful as we make these decisions to get some data points about how much being online has made a difference as far as participation. I think that would maybe make a case for itself as far as us thinking about accessibility and what it means to folks to be able to participate. I don't know if we had any numbers on in person. I'm guessing we always keep a sign-in sheet, right, for folks that attend. So, looking at those numbers can help us, I think, define our financial investment path too.
Great, thanks. Rich?
Yeah, I had a question for Dominic. Would it be possible at the legislative meeting next Wednesday or Tuesday, just to demonstrate what it would look like up here so we could see it? Would that be really hard?
It's certainly possible. We have the ability to do it here. Here you see a slightly altered version, which just has, each of the people with their camera turned on, et cetera. So there are some other layers that we want to do to make sure people who were joining would have cameras, on or off for different things. But yeah, certainly you could look at this in the full legislature meeting and see what it looked like.
Remarkably good-looking people, but
and very, very large.
I can see those people much better than on the screen at the end.
And there are things we should be doing we could do with this as well to have it show up similarly.
Okay,
People are fixing it.
Yeah. See you.
well,
So,
that's the answer. Thank you, Dominic.
Thank you.
Dan?
Well, yeah, a couple of things are kind of small, but this is the moment to talk about this. So the first thing I noticed when we set up this new system was that when I was listening to or addressing someone that's on the screen, I had to turn this way to look at them. And normally when I speak, I either face the chair or sometimes if I'm feeling telegenic, I know the cameras are up there, so I'm kind of looking that way. And so I get it's kind of a small thing, but it's also just real. It now is like a third place, and it's a little disorienting for me. What's that? And then also what answer, that was the second thing I noticed, that you know, it is oriented for us, but less so for the public visiting. And then, sorry, back to the other one though, I started to wonder, and I don't need an answer, but is there any experimentation that could be done with where the camera is? Like if that would change something too. If the camera was over there, I'm talking in my normal way with that. So just putting it out there for thought.
Certainly, and I think the goal of getting the yeses or answers to these plus planning for next year would be to use the cameras in the room and to thoughtfully consider where those are, just as you're describing. And as Martha talked about with the IDA meeting earlier, and how that looked, that's how they used to look on cable or what have you using those cameras.
Right.
And so certainly that would be an implication of this, is we would look at all of those different things and make sure that it did meet, you know, the high quality production is our goal. So definitely.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, everybody's raising really great questions and thoughts and concerns. I think Dominic and Kathy are hearing all of this, and the goal again is for us to say yes, this or no, this is, you know, what we want to do, and then we can try to iron out some of those things and, you know, try to figure out the best place for the screen, or, you know, how I think. And again, there's the bigger questions going forward of the, you know, streaming to cable and all of that, which Dominic has all of that in his brain, and I trust that he's going to help us figure it out. So Martha, did you have something else to say?
Yeah, just one quick thing. I'm sure everybody also has noticed that like Leslie is barely visible in the corner, and Henry usually sits to your right. Is that correct? So you can't see Henry at all. And that means Dave McKenna, I think also, or is it Mike Sigler's? I don't know if the camera can be moved down because we see the ceiling really well. So that's just a detail, but maybe it can be changed. I don't know. In other words, if the camera doesn't show the ceiling but is angled differently, you might be able to see the people closest to the screen. That's better. Yeah. That's better. Okay.
You're just fixing things.
Dominic has all the answers.
At the push of a button.
Push of a
Thank
button.
you.
So what I'm hearing, there's a lot of, you know, questions, but what I'm hearing is that pretty much folks want to continue offering the hybrid option, particularly right now when we are seeing a lot more cases of COVID, and the state is considering letting us go back to Zoom meetings. So I think that's the general consensus. I think there's certainly more conversation to be had, but we can tell Dominic and Kathy and others that this is the direction we want to go, and they can come back to us with specific questions, or I can talk more with them and try to address some of these things. I think, as with everything, you know, it's not maybe going to be perfect, and it's not necessarily going to be exactly like it used to be. Things change. So I think we all have to, you know, aim for the best quality and realize that it might not be exactly perfect. So I think we've given them direction. Dominic is nodding. Any last thoughts? Oh, Lisa.
I did have one question while we're on this topic, because department heads are going to be looking to administration for direction as to how the legislature would like to proceed with the expanded budget committee meetings, and whether they should prepare to present in person or via Zoom. And right now, I know the preference is for staff to be presenting via Zoom. So that was what I assumed how I would be directing them moving forward, but I wanted to check that assumption here.
I mean, my inclination would be yes, that they would present via Zoom, and that would be fine with me. I don't know, other thoughts from folks? I mean, if the goal is that we're trying to keep as few people in chambers as possible, we would want them to be on Zoom. But nobody's, Leslie?
I've heard from other folks who are watching from the public that it's far easier for them to hear and see the materials in the presenter when they're on Zoom and not here in chambers.
Yeah.
And they know who they are then too.
Right. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, so that would be your answer, Lisa.
Thank you.
Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. So we have, our next topic is talking about some more rules or revision of some rules. And again, this is just a discussion. We had talked, I don't know, a couple months ago about whether there should be a legislator code of conduct. And Rich and Leslie and I were tasked to meet and give some more thought to this and then bring some ideas back to the committee. So we did, and what we kind of decided was that instead of a separate document or some other, manual that legislators have to read, that we could potentially revise a couple of the rules, which would be Rule 5 and I think, 15? No, 16, 17. So Rule 5 and 17. So what we did was we took information that was already in the rules in both of those sections, and we added some language, we cleaned up some language with the idea of sort of making things a little bit more clear, but also adding in some thoughts about legislator conduct. So there's a clean version and the edited version or the red line version. And I think we can just sort of talk about, I don't know if I'm going to go through everything, but if there are things that stuck out to people that anybody wanted to talk about, we certainly can. Again, we're not voting on anything today. This is just to kind of bring the idea forward, and with the hope that maybe at our next meeting, we could actually vote on it. So I hope folks have read it, and if there are thoughts, we'll go with Dan.
So I thought this was very good. I was really, really pleased at how this came out. I wasn't sure what this would be like. There was just one or two things that I just want to bring up. They're not huge things, but again, this is what we're here for, to talk about this stuff. So I'm on packet page 28, first paragraph. And there's a sentence there that says the chair may limit, complete, or stop discussion in a meeting. And that really stopped me when I was reading this. Like, wow, is that true? Or to what extent is that true?
Dan?
Yeah.
You might refer on page 33, which has the red line.
Okay.
It might be clearer to get to where you're.
Except all my handwritten notes are on page 28.
Okay, do what you want.
And I see, so by the red line, that means that one was added, correct? That was a sentence you added.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's something about that just, I'm still not sure how to think about it. I mean, I think it's true, right? Or is it? I mean, in Robert's rules, there are ways that the membership can keep talking. So let's just stop there for a second. Then the other one, well, there's two more actually. It's just the very next paragraph. And I see that it was not changed from the last time, but here's what it says. The legislature shall decide the case without debate. This is about an appeal. And I thought that was really interesting, without debate. So I looked into that one a little bit about Robert's rules and what it has to say about that. And it starts splitting some hairs. And maybe I won't go into it right now, but I just wanted to say that I did have a question about that, and I did find some references in Robert's rules where it talks about what's debatable and what's not, and I'll just leave it there for now. Then the last thing I wanted to mention would be well, I have it on back page 32, so it must have been about a sentence there. Hang on one sec. Okay, yeah, well, it's that whole idea of the legislators consulting with the county administrator on performance issues about department heads. And I thought that was perfectly fine what got written there, but I realized when I was done that I expect the county administrator to keep the legislators in the loop about department head performance to some extent. Especially there have been cases in both ways when a department head has been terminated and we find out about it basically after the deed is done. There have been other times when we hear about issues in advance, and so we have a lot of time to kind of absorb it and maybe brainstorm with the county administrator. And what I realized is that I don't think there's anything in here about the county administrator's responsibility for keeping legislators in the loop about department head performance. Don't know if it belongs in here, but it was something that occurred to me when I read this. Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I mean, on that one, you're right. And I agree, like that's sort of an expectation. That's been my expectation, is that the county administrator will tell us, if there's, upper level situations that we need to hear about. But I don't know if we can put that in here. This is the legislature rules, so we can't really dictate that, but we can convey that to our, county administrator. And then the other, back to your one about the shall decide without debate. I feel like, you probably remember more, and you said you looked into it, but there was a couple other places in the rules when we went through that there were things that had to be decided without debate, right? Like.
Yes, there are certain specific motions that are not debatable.
Right.
This one says an appeal from the chair. It turns out there's different kinds of appeals, and some are debatable and some aren't. And so that's the kind of information I found.
Okay.
And it wasn't clear what this appeal was referring to. Is it appeal about a parliamentary procedure, or is it an appeal about indecorum, which is up there too, right? This is giving the chair a little bit of moral authority to say, what you just said is out of line. Is it that kind of appeal we're talking about, or is it an appeal where they made an incorrect parliamentary procedure?
I think, go ahead, Leslie.
So I think we were referring to and making amendments only to order and decorum in this area. And so this is where the chair has made a ruling around order and decorum. And if someone would like to make an appeal, then here are the next steps. And here's what's permitted.
Okay, that indecorum is undebatable. So that's good. That's consistent with what you said. But I do want to mention one other thing I found, which is that in this, I'm pretty sure it refers to this specific circumstance. I'm not clear. It's an appeal from the chair. Never mind, I'll get back to you on that.
Okay.
Sorry.
That's okay.
It's a little confusing.
I'm glad you're thinking critically about this. You had fun talking about it. Rich, go ahead.
Prior to the meeting, Martha had sent out an email on request to staff. And I think she makes a good point there about the flow of the work. And I'd love to put Lisa on the spot. Well, what she thinks on this point. And principally, it's should non-routine requests for information go through the county administrator, or should they go to the department head with notice to the county administrator?
So this is my first thought and my first take on hearing it. So we're looking at non-routine requests to staff. I think probably as long as the department head, the contact is with the department head with a CC to the county administrator. That's my initial thought. My initial thought is not direct to the staff person under the department head.
So, okay, say that again, not direct to the staff person, contact the department head with CC to the county administrator.
Yeah, that's at least that's my first take on it. I haven't read it, and maybe I should think about it a little more, but that was my first take on it.
Yeah, and please do, but, and to clarify further, these are non-routine requests that require special effort. So for example, it would be, can you compare these two studies that we did and analyze this point between them? Something that would take a fair amount of work.
Okay, yeah, so I guess it's all in the definition of what's non-routine and how much work really. Definitely the county administrator should be apprised of it, but in terms of in what order or through what filter, I would just need to give it a little more thought.
Yeah, and I think that's the purpose of this, is to have this conversation and think through. I mean, we tried to break it into sort of different categories about, when can a legislator contact a staff person and say, can you tell me about plastics that are recycled? What plastics are recyclable? Like, that's a fairly simple question that you can contact someone and ask. But if you're asking, tell me about this policy compared to that policy about plastics, then so maybe we need to sort of help or refine our definitions of what the different categories are a little bit. Leslie's raising her eyebrows at me.
I hope people will Google things before they email staff. Right? Try to find out.
Let's put that in the first sentence.
Yeah. I guess I'm just thinking the variable or the thing that I think about is the extent to which it would divert from from the staff's workload, right, or what they're doing, but also the priority level of the request if it is. So yeah, there's more to consider.
Yeah, and I think, simple questions, we're trying to differentiate between simple questions and something that would take away from their regular workload. And that was the sort of question, well, should the legislator who has those questions, should they go to the department head? Should they go to the county administrator? Should they go to the committee chair? And trying to, or all of those people, and then, it can be decided that, okay, this is a bigger request, we need to go through the committee process or whatever. But so I guess I'm just saying maybe we should all kind of reread this language and make sure it is saying what we want it to say. Annie?
Thanks, Amanda. I just wanted to bring up an adjacent topic. I didn't see it in the policy or in these rules, and maybe I missed it, but I'm interested in seeing if we can put something in that says if a committee member emails or contacts the staff, that they CC in the chair of that committee.
If the committee member emails staff, they should CC the chair.
Right.
Did we talk about that in our?
Yes. Is the role of the committee chair? I thought I saw something in there about, wasn't it the same distinction about whether it's a major question or a minor question? No?
Well, we have the role of the committee chair, but we don't really have like the role of committee members.
Or was that in Martha's email, maybe?
I don't know. Yeah, I mean,
to me, even if it's a minor question, I mean, you know, you might be splitting hairs, but just if for me as a chair, if I'm just like kept apprised of, you know, of the conversation, so that we're not, you know, asking questions several different times, you know, of the staff, for instance, and just to keep track of what's going on.
sure. Rich or Leslie, I'm just trying to remember if we talked about that in our,
I don't believe we did.
okay.
I don't have any recollection.
No, I think we were thinking of the broader role of the chair as opposed to specific communications and how we manage communications across different levels of oversight.
And I also foresee there's issues where it's not clear which committee chair might be involved with a specific question.
Yeah.
But as a matter of just general practice, maybe we could say that that's good practice if you can identify the committee chair, that they're apprised that you're asking the question.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'm making a note and we can see if we can squeeze that in.
I think take a quick look at packet page 31.
Okay.
The paragraph that starts with non-routine requests.
What page?
Packet page 31.
Right.
Paragraph that starts with non-routine requests. It does say that that they should be directed toward the Special Expanding Committee chair and the county administrator.
If that was in my email, and I think that's part of that is where you saw it before, and that's added. It looks like it's added to the language.
Yeah, so so that was the discussion that we had about the bigger requests, but I'm not sure if Annie's talking about just, I want to ask a question, like, when does the EMC meet? Do you need to CC the committee chair as well? I mean, that's, we were trying to differentiate between simple questions and, you know, oh, I want the EMC to work on this project. Well, then you need to talk to the committee chair and you need to probably talk to the chair of the EMC and, you know, so I'm not, so are you suggesting, Annie, that if somebody is emailing, a legislator is emailing a staff person with a simple question, they should also CC the committee chair?
Not a simple question. What is, you know, when does that meet? Who do I need to be there? That type of thing. Or do you have the agenda? No, it's more a bigger question. Or even if they're sharing information, like, you know, if you know, I'm on HED and, you know, I think if I'm sharing with the department staff of, hey, you know, are you aware of this thing that's going on in New York State regarding blah, blah, blah for this, or are you guys attending this or know about this? I just think it's good to loop in the chair so they also are part of that. So in general communication, if it's not something really minor.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, I hope that is what that sentence that we added about in non-routine requests was addressing that. But go ahead, Martha, and then we're running out of time here.
Yeah, this was in my email and it says to have to do with what you've sort of been dancing around. these non-routine requests, this says as it's written, I'm looking at it, page 36, that the non-routine request goes to the county administrator and that's the committee chair. And what I wrote in my email was that seemed way more traffic than was wise, that would, like, if it goes to the department head with a copy to the chair and the county administrator, that I think would make more sense, that then they are both apprised of it, but not responsible for answering or not responsible for, making sure the question gets, settled. I know just when I, personally going through things that I scan a lot of stuff that I'm interested in, but I'm not responsible for, that's a different level of attention and requirement than something comes to me that I have to settle or resolve. So I think, as Lisa was saying, she'd have to think some more about this. I think in general, usually those kind of things are actually something the department head can better answer. Usually not the committee chair or the county administrator. They'd have to go to the department head anyway. So especially to preserve, to reduce workload for the county administrator, I'd much rather see that written as the default is write to the department head, copy the administrator and the committee chair. So that was sort of the gist of my email. And I also then, just one other quick thing, I wondered if there should be something about direct report evaluations in the policy, it's not exactly rules, but it sort of felt like it might fit under the performance section. I just thought maybe that could be added.
Do folks have thoughts about that? Direct report information in this? I mean, I guess I'm not sure what the rule would be that we have to do that.
I mean, something in this on decorum?
I think she's saying under Rule 17, communication with staff.
No, I meant under performance, it's talking about legislators requesting information about staff and that kind of thing. It felt like it might fit there, just a sentence about the legislators don't review other staff except for 4 people, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be okay to add in a sentence that said it's the legislature's responsibility to do performance evaluations on our said direct reports. I'm going to add in something there.
Okay, thanks.
And so again, there's plenty of time to keep talking about this. If there's other legislators who want to bring something up, they're welcome to bring it up. Jonathan has to leave. We're just about out of time. Thank you for that discussion. I'm just going to ask if any of our staff folks that are on the list have any particular reports they want to give to us today.
I have no report, thank you.
Great, thanks, Lisa. Dominic doesn't. Jonathan's leaving. Rick, is there anything you want to tell us?
No, nothing special for today.
Cool, thank you all. Anything else from committee members? Oh, Dan, we're supposed to talk about parking.
I noticed that.
I keep forgetting.
Next time.
I'm gonna make a note and we're gonna talk about parking.
There's excitement.
All right, I think we're good. Thanks everybody for all the good work. We are adjourned.
Thanks.
Oh, we're still recording. We're gonna turn off the recording.